The Golden Spoon Bistro sparkled with wealth and polish. Sunlight poured through stained glass windows, casting colored patterns across white linen tables. The sound of clinking silverware and low, refined voices floated through the air. To the EUR guests, it was an oasis of privilege, a place where power whispered and status was silently affirmed. In this world of sharp suits and pearl necklaces, one woman moved quickly and quietly among the tables. Her uniform was simple, her posture graceful. Maya carried a heavy tray with the steady hands of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. She placed dishes with care, offering a polite nod and soft smile, then turned smoothly to the next table. To most, she was invisible. To Maya, this was her stage of survival. At the far corner sat Sterling Thorne. His presence was impossible to ignore. Broad-shouldered, dressed in a tailored suit, he sat like a king holding court. His reputation was well known, Boston's billionaire real estate mogul. A man as ruthless as he was rich, admired by some, feared by most. Today his sharp eyes roamed the room, already searching for something to control. In front of him sat a bone china teacup, untouched, its steam still faintly rising. He tapped the saucer once, loudly enough to break the calm hum of conversation. "Waitress," his voice rang out, sharp as a whip. Heads turned toward him. Maya, still holding her tray, looked up and approached his table. She kept her steps light, her face composed. "Yes, sir?" Sterling lifted the cup between two fingers as though the porcelain itself might offend him. He tilted it, then set it down with deliberate force. "Is this supposed to be warm?" His words sliced through the quiet like a blade. Maya blinked, surprised. She had poured the tea herself only minutes ago. It was still fresh. She kept her voice gentle. "I brewed it just before serving, sir. Perhaps it cooled quickly. I can bring you a new one." Sterling leaned back, smirk curling on his lips. He wanted the room to hear him. "Cooled quickly? Are you daft? This is tepid. This is an insult." His voice rose, echoing in the grand hall. Forks froze midway to mouths. Conversations halted. The weight of silence spread like a heavy curtain. Maya's cheeks flushed, but she stood tall. "I'll be glad to replace it for you." But Sterling wasn't finished. His eyes gleamed with a cruel sort of pleasure. "Are you even capable of performing basic tasks? Or is that too much to expect?" The words dripped with disdain, carefully crafted to wound. He reached for the cup again. This time he lifted it slowly, tilting it outward, not toward the saucer but toward the table. The golden liquid poured, not in a spill, but in a controlled stream, soaking the crisp white cloth beneath. Gasps rippled around the room. The stain spread wider and wider, an ugly mark against perfection. Sterling watched the tea run like it was a show for his amusement. He placed the empty cup back down with a clink and looked directly at Maya. "There, do you see?" His voice was smooth, mocking. "That is what happens when incompetence is allowed to walk around in uniform." For a moment, no one moved. Eyes darted between Sterling and Maya, some filled with pity, others with fear. A woman in emerald green narrowed her gaze but said nothing. The billionaire's sneer deepened, feeding on the silence. Maya's hands, still holding the tray, trembled, ever so slightly. She lowered it carefully onto a side table and folded her fingers together to still them. Her face was calm, her eyes steady, but deep inside a storm raged. She had endured many things in her life: loss, hardship, sacrifice. But public humiliation struck a raw place. She met Sterling's gaze for only a second. Her dark eyes flickered with something fierce, something he did not notice, or perhaps dismissed too quickly. Then it was gone, hidden behind a mask of dignity. The room remained hushed, waiting for her to crumble, to break. But Maya only bowed her head slightly. "I will bring you a fresh cup," she said, her tone soft yet unwavering. Sterling smirked, leaning back in satisfaction, convinced he had crushed her. Yet he had no idea that the quiet waitress he had just tried to shame carried more power than he could ever imagine. Beneath her silence lay years of strength, and a truth that would one day tear his world apart. Maya moved with quiet grace through the golden spoon that day, but her mind carried years of memories far heavier than any tray of dishes. To the guests she served, she was just another waitress. To herself, she was a mother, a daughter, and a woman who had once dreamed of a very different life. There was a time when Maya wasn't balancing coffee cups and silver trays. She had walked across the stone steps of Boston University, a bright student with notebooks full of plans. Her professors praised her for her empathy, her patience, her sharp insight. She had chosen child psychology, driven by a heart that wanted to help children who carried invisible wounds. That path had once stretched out in front of her, clear and full of promise. But life is not always kind to those who dream. Her mother, a nurse who worked endless shifts, had fallen gravely ill. The bills stacked high, each envelope heavier than the last. Around the same time, men in suits began circling their neighborhood, speaking of development, progress, and opportunity. They offered quick loans to families like hers, loans that looked like a lifeline but were built to strangle. Maya remembered the day her mother wept at the kitchen table, an eviction notice crumpled in her hand. She remembered the shame of packing, up their small apartment, the sound of neighbors whispering, the hollow ache of losing not just a home, but a sense of safety. What Maya didn't know at first was that the man at the center of those schemes was none other than Sterling Thorne. His real estate empire grew fat on the losses of families like hers. She only discovered that truth later, when she traced the names behind the papers, the companies that owned the debts, the pattern that always led back to him. By then it was too late. Maya left university just one semester before graduation. Her scholarship couldn't stretch to cover her mother's treatments, the rent, and the daily costs of survival. The bright lecture halls and the library full of books were replaced by the noise of clattering dishes and the sting of long hours on her feet. She didn't complain. She worked. First for her mother, then later for her son. Her son, Noah, was her light. From the day he was born, she saw in his curious eyes the same hunger for knowledge she once had. She saved every dollar, every tip, every extra shift, not for herself, but for him. She wanted him to have the chances she lost, to live a life unburdened by the shadows of debt and broken promises. To the outside world, she was only a waitress. To Noah, she was the strongest person alive. And it was that quiet strength that kept her moving day after day, even under the gaze of men like Sterling Thorne. Inside the golden spoon, humiliation burned her skin when Sterling spilled the tea across the tablecloth, but she refused to let it break her. Her composure was not weakness. It was armor forged through years of hardship. Every cruel word he spoke, every mocking glance pressed against old scars. But those scars had hardened her. Few people knew her full story. The other waitstaff saw her as dependable, always arriving early, always ready to help. The head chef respected her calm under pressure, her refusal to crumble even in the hardest rush hours. Patrons only noticed the tray in her hands, not the weight in her heart. What no one could see was the vow she had made. Years earlier, standing at her father's grave with only the cold wind as witness, she had promised to reclaim her family's dignity. She had whispered into the stone that one day she would face the man who had destroyed so many lives. Now, here she was, face to face with him every week, carrying plates to his table, listening to his voice slice through the air like a knife. He believed she was powerless. He believed she was nothing more than the uniform she wore. But Maya carried a truth hidden deep, a truth that connected her to him in ways he couldn't imagine. She had endured poverty, humiliation, and grief. But beneath it all was a quiet fire. She would not let her son grow up under the same shadow. She would not let Sterling's cruelty go unchallenged forever. As Sterling leaned back that day, smug after spilling his tea, Maya's calm gaze lingered on him just a moment too long. To him it looked like submission. To her it was a reminder of the past he had helped create, a reminder of the promise she had made, and a reminder that she was not done yet. The bistro's chatter slowly returned, though quieter than before. Forks moved again, glasses clinked, but the atmosphere had shifted. People had seen the billionaire's cruelty, and they had seen the dignity of the waitress who endured it. The moment passed, but its echo would linger. Maya turned, lifted her tray again, and walked to the kitchen. Her steps were steady. Her mind was not on the spilled tea, but on the long road she had traveled, and the even longer road ahead. For, in the silence of her heart, she carried both her past struggles and the secret that would one day change everything. The lunchtime rush grew louder, then quiet again like the tide. Crystal glasses chimed, chairs scraped on polished wood. Maya kept moving, clearing plates, refilling water, asking softly if anyone needed anything else. Her face was calm, but inside she was holding the room together one breath at a time. The stain from the spilled tea had been lifted by a busser, yet the memory of it sat on the tables like a shadow. People went back to their meals, but their eyes kept drifting to the corner where the billionaire waited for his next chance to be seen. Sterling raised one finger without looking up, as if he were summoning the lights. Maya stepped toward him with careful steps, the tray tucked to her side. He did not greet her. He did not thank her. He simply stared at the empty cup and said, louder than needed, that his coffee should already be here. His tone was not a request, it was a test. She nodded once. I will bring it right away. He tilted his head, a slow smile forming. Do you understand what hot means, or do I need to explain that too? A few guests at nearby tables stiffened. Their forks hovered in the air. No one spoke. This is how power behaves, they thought. It speaks and expects the room to bend. Maya met his stare for one steady heartbeat, then turned toward the service station. In the kitchen past, steam curled from fresh cups. She checked the thermometer as she always did, wiped the saucer, and carried the coffee out like it was something sacred. She set the cup down in front of him with gentle hands. Freshly brewed, sir. Sterling leaned forward and breathed, over the rim as if he might measure the heat with his own pride. He did not taste it. He did not thank her. He glanced up at the half circle of developers and investors seated nearby and felt the moment tighten around him. Then he flicked his fingers toward the cup. Do you call this hot? He said, his voice pitched to reach the far wall. Or is this the same as your tea, barely warm and barely worthy of this room? He picked up a crisp bill from the table, folded it, then folded it again. The paper made a small dry sound. He held it between two fingers for everyone to see, smiling like a magician about to perform. Maya saw the move before he made it. She did not flinch. She stood with her hands linked lightly at her waist, her shoulders set, her chin level. The bill snapped through the air and struck her forehead. Not hard, but clear enough to sting. It bounced off and fell into a half-finished plate of risotto, where it sank into butter and herbs. A short, uneasy laugh came from someone who wished they had stayed silent. Another guest stared down at their own hands. The stain on the white cloth grew a little larger. There, Sterling said, sitting back. A lesson in service. Maya felt heat rise in her face, the body's honest reply to public shame. She placed her palm against the side of the tray to steady herself. She thought of a windswept hill and a simple stone with her father's name. She heard the promise she had made there, spoken in a quiet voice, a vow that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with dignity. She let the words pass through her, then she breathed in and let them settle. When she looked up again, her eyes were clear. Respect is the standard here, she said, steady and low. I will replace anything that does not meet it. He slammed his hand on the table. Silverware jumped. A spoon clattered. Do not tell me about standards, he said. I set them. Maya did not back away. She did not argue. She reached to remove the plate with the ruined bill, lifted it and set it on her tray with the same care she would give a bowl of soup for a child. I will clear this now, she said, and she did. Across the room, a woman in an emerald suit watched, in silence. At the bar, a line cook paused in the mirror between bottles. The manager stood at the doorway to the private room, his jaw tight. Phones were not raised, but eyes were wide. Everyone understood something larger than coffee had been placed on the table. Maya brought a new cloth to the corner, glided the stain away, and reset the space. Fresh napkin, polished spoon. A small vase turned so the flower faced the guest. The smallest acts became a language. The room began to breathe again, but slower, as if it had learned that its air could be taken. Sterling's voice cut once more through the hush. "You will apologize to this table for wasting our time." She looked at the faces beyond him. Some were blank, trained to show nothing. Some were ashamed for their silence. She let the pause rest just long enough to make a choice. "I am sorry for any delay," she said to the guests, her tone even. "Your desserts will be out in a moment." Then she faced the billionaire without raising her voice. "And I will continue to serve you well." It was not defiance. It was a boundary, set with the calm of a person who knows her worth. She lifted the tray again and walked to the service doors. On the way, she passed the table where the bill had fallen. A young couple sat there, hands folded together, eyes on her. The woman gave the smallest nod, almost nothing, but Maya felt it, all the same. A bridge between strangers. Inside the service hall, she stopped for a breath against cool tile. The hallway hummed with the kitchen's rhythm. She checked the ticket rail, soothed a new server with a few quick words, and lifted the next tray. Her pulse slowed. Her face returned to its calm. But inside, the vow rose again. She remembered the morning at the grave, frost on the grass, her fingers numb. She had promised to live with her back straight. She had promised to find the thread that tied their pain to the people who profited from it. She had promised to reclaim her family name not with noise but with proof. That promise did not ask for rage. It asked for patience. It asked for a clear head and a steady hand. It asked for a plan. In the dining room, the scene rebuilt itself. Laughter returned, thin at first, then fuller as plates of brulee cracked under spoons. Sterling laughed too, a rough sound that tried to reclaim the room. He did not notice the way people avoided his eyes. He did not notice that the performance had turned, that pity had shifted away from him and settled on the woman he had tried to shame. Maya noticed. She noticed everything. She marked the rhythm of his demands, the names on his guest list, the times his driver idled in the alley, the door he favored for private calls. She noted who watched her with kindness and who watched her with fear. She filed it all away with the same care she gave to each table setting. When she returned to his corner with a fresh pot, she poured without a tremor. The coffee steamed like a small cloud. She set the pot down and stepped back. He did not thank her. He did not look at her. That was fine. She was not seeking his approval. She was building a bridge out of this room. The day moved forward. Checks closed. Coats were claimed. The door chimed, and the afternoon light shifted to gold. As the last cups were stacked and the last crumb was brushed away, a calm settled over the bistro. The stain was gone from the cloth, but something had been written on the air. Maya untied her apron behind the service door and folded it precisely. The fabric still smelled faintly of citrus and steam. She pressed her palm flat against it for a moment, feeling the cotton and the day. Then she slipped the apron onto its hook and stepped back into the dining room. The billionaire's laughter floated from the corner again, but it sounded smaller now. She glanced once at him, not with anger, but with the quiet attention of someone who has measured the distance and decided on the path. The room, thought it, had witnessed a small act of cruelty. It had, but it had also witnessed something else. The beginning of a reckoning he did not yet see. She lifted her chin and moved on to the next table. The vow walked with her. The plan took shape. And the first threads of a truth, hidden for years, drew tighter, ready to pull. The bistro's noise slowly softened as evening came. Candles flickered on polished tables, and the last golden light filtered through the stained glass. To anyone watching, it looked like an ordinary night in the city's most elegant restaurant. But for Maya, each step she took between tables was more than routine. Every movement was practice, every glance was a calculation. Every word she spoke was measured. Sterling believed she was invisible. That was his mistake. For months, Maya had been quietly building something beyond the eyes of those who dismissed her. While others saw only a waitress, she was keeping track of more than orders. She watched the schedules of the rich and powerful who visited, noting who laughed too loudly at Sterling's jokes, who avoided his gaze, who whispered once he turned his back. She kept mental files the way others kept ledgers. In the kitchen, the head chef sometimes lingered in the doorway, his tired eyes following her with respect. He had worked beside her long enough to see the steel beneath her calm exterior. He knew she carried more than trays. He knew she carried secrets. Once, when the night shift grew quiet, he had muttered, "Men like him always think they're untouchable, but nobody really is." Maya had only given a faint smile. She said little, but she listened closely. Her allies were not loud. They were people the world often overlooked, those who had also been bruised by Sterling's empire. A retired administrative assistant who had once managed the Billionaire's calendar still carried folders of memories he thought buried. An old journalist, long retired, still had files tucked away in boxes, reports no paper had dared to print, when the Billionaire's shadow stretched too long. These people, tired but unbroken, saw in Maya not just another survivor, but a chance to set things right. In quiet meetings over coffee and back, corners of libraries or whispered talks in bus stations, Maya pieced together fragments of a puzzle. The old assistant spoke of missing benefit files, of a photograph he had once seen of Sterling's son with a young woman no one in the family spoke about. The journalist still had affidavits, sealed reports, names of victims scattered across the city, families whose homes had been stolen through clever lies. Maya kept all of it safe, not in a box under her bed, but locked away in her mind and secured, in places even Sterling would not think to look. She learned to store copies with trusted hands, to spread the risk so that even if someone tried to silence her, the truth would not vanish. One detail had haunted her most of all. Each year on the third Friday of October, Sterling would disappear for a few hours. No gala, no meetings, no public appearances. He would be seen at a cemetery, alone, standing before a quiet grave few people knew existed. The retired assistant had told her this in a whisper, unsure of its meaning but certain of the pattern. Why would a man so proud of power hide such a ritual? The answer tugged at her. She began to see a thread, connecting his cruelty in the bistro to something he wanted kept buried. She did not yet have all the proof, but she knew the day would come when the silence would break. In the meantime, she played her part. She cleared his tables, she carried his cups, she let his words fall like stones into water, rippling but never sinking her. Each time he mocked her, each time he tried to remind her of her place, she remembered the truth he did not know. She remembered her vow at the grave. He thought he was humiliating a waitress. In reality, he was feeding the fire of someone who had already mapped the steps toward his downfall. As the night at the Golden Spoon drew to a close, Sterling laughed too loudly at his own jokes, boasting to his table about deals and victories. He barely noticed Maya as she passed behind him, refilling glasses, her expression as calm as ever. But her eyes, when they flicked toward him, carried something he could not see, a quiet certainty. Her time was coming. And when it did, it would not arrive with shouting or anger. It would arrive with documents, with witnesses, with proof strong enough to collapse the walls he had built around himself. In the heart of that glittering bistro, among the soft lights and polished wood, a hidden war was already being fought. Sterling thought the night belonged to him. He did not know that the woman in black uniform, the one he tried to reduce to nothing, was already writing the first lines of his reckoning. The evening crowd had just begun to settle when the Heir in. The Golden Spoon changed again. Sterling was in his element, his voice cutting through the clink of silverware as he boasted about deals and power. His laugh, loud and self-satisfied, rolled across the room. For him, the earlier humiliation of the waitress was already forgotten, a small show to prove his dominance. He had no idea that the performance was about to turn against him. The front door opened with a soft chime. Heads lifted briefly, curious, before returning to their meals. In walked a woman dressed in deep emerald green, her silver hair catching the glow of chandeliers. She carried herself with a quiet authority, the kind that didn't need to be spoken. Some of the guests recognized her instantly. Eleanor, a woman of influence, known for her art collections and her sharp, unshakable presence. She was not alone. Beside her walked a little girl no more than 6 with wide eyes that seemed to drink in the world around her. Her braids were decorated with bright beads that clicked softly as she moved. She held Eleanor's hand tightly, her small steps quickened by both nerves and curiosity. The bistro, so polished and proper, seemed overwhelming to such a small child. Yet when her eyes found Maya, everything else melted away. "Mommy!" The word rang out clear and innocent, louder than any insult Sterling had ever thrown. The little girl tugged free of Eleanor's hand and ran toward Maya, her face lighting with joy. The room froze. Forks clattered onto plates. Glasses stopped halfway to lips. Every conversation died mid-sentence. All eyes turned to the child pressing herself against Maya's side, arms wrapping around her waist. Maya's body stiffened in shock, then slowly softened. She bent down, her hands gentle as she touched the child's shoulders. "Hello, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice warm, almost trembling with emotion. "You're here?" The girl nodded eagerly, her braids bouncing, her smile radiant. She clung tighter to Maya, completely unaware of the storm her single word had unleashed. Sterling's smirk faltered. His face drained of color as though the child's voice had pierced something hidden deep inside him. He stared, eyes wide, his hand frozen on the stem of his glass. For the first time that evening, his mask of arrogance cracked. He barked out a brittle laugh, one that fooled no one. "She's confused," he said quickly, his tone sharp, desperate. "Children see faces, uniforms. They mistake kindness for family." He waved a hand as if brushing away the moment. "She doesn't know what she's saying." But the child refused to let go of Maya. She buried her face against the dark fabric of her uniform, whispering, "Mommy" again, her voice muffled but certain. Murmurs spread like wildfire through the restaurant. Guests leaned toward each other, eyes wide with shock. They had watched Sterling humiliate the waitress only moments before, and now they saw him undone by the most innocent of truths. A child's voice. Eleanor stepped forward, her gaze cold and piercing. She looked not at Maya, but directly at Sterling. Her words cut through the silence. "She is not confused," she said firmly, "and you know it." The weight of her tone silenced even the faint whispers. Sterling tried to speak, but no sound came. His hand trembled slightly as he set down his glass. He looked from Maya to the child and back again, his expression trapped between fury and fear. The carefully crafted world around him, the empire built on image and intimidation, suddenly felt fragile. Maya held the little girl close, her eyes soft with love, but steady with something stronger. She did not speak yet. She let the moment unfold. She let the truth hang in the air, undeniable, echoing louder than anything she could have said. The child's innocent cry had opened a door that could never be closed again. Sterling could try to deny it, to dismiss it, but the truth had stepped into the room. And the truth had a face, a name, and a bond stronger than his power. The golden spoon, once filled with whispers of wealth and prestige, now brimmed with something else, tension, shock, and the first stirrings of revelation. Guests shifted uneasily in their chairs, sensing they were witnessing the start of something larger than a dinner scandal. Maya's hand rested on the girl's back, steady and protective. Her heart raced, but her eyes stayed calm. This was the moment she had been preparing for. A single word from a child had shaken the foundations of a man who thought himself untouchable. And though the full truth was still hidden, it was closer, now ready to break open. Sterling Thorne had spent years burying secrets, but secrets have a way of rising, and this one had found its voice in the sweetest, clearest call. Mommy. The golden spoon had never been so silent. The little girl's voice still echoed in the air, a bell that could not be unheard. Guests leaned closer, their eyes darting from Maya to Sterling, waiting for the next breath to break the tension. Sterling shifted in his chair, his face pale under the golden light. His hand gripped the armrest as though the wood might hold him steady. He forced out a laugh, brittle and sharp. Ridiculous, she's confused. This woman, this waitress, is nothing. His words stumbled as he spoke them, no longer smooth, no longer sure. Maya did not answer right away. She placed a hand gently on the little girl's shoulder, steadying her, then slowly straightened. Her eyes locked on Sterling's. For the first time that evening, her calm carried more power than his rage. "You say I am nothing," Maya said softly, "but you know the truth." Gasps rippled across the room. People leaned forward, hungry for what would come next. She reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out something small, worn with time. A photograph. The edges were creased, the colors faded, but the image spoke louder than words. She held it high enough for the closest tables to see. It showed a younger Maya, radiant with joy, standing beside a young man whose smile was wide and familiar. His arm wrapped tightly around her shoulders. His face, so like Sterling's yet kinder, was instantly recognizable. Daniel Thorne, Sterling's son. A wave of shock passed over the room. Utensils clattered, whispers grew urgent. Sterling's mouth opened but no sound came. His eyes locked on the picture as though it were a ghost risen from the past. "This," Maya said, her voice steady, "was my wedding day. Your son and I stood together, legally married, before the world ever saw the story you wanted told. He was my husband, and this child," she placed her hand on the little girl's head, "is his daughter." The little girl peeked up from Maya's side, her innocent eyes wide, her fingers still gripping her mother's apron. She didn't understand the storm her presence had unleashed, but her small voice had already rewritten the night. The guests gasped again, louder this time. A few covered their mouths, others turned to each other in disbelief. A billionaire's carefully built image, cracked wide open by a faded photograph and a child's cry. Sterling slammed his hand on the table, silverware jumping, glasses rattling. "Lies," he thundered, though his voice broke around the edges. "This is a trick, forgery, desperation from a woman looking to profit." But the conviction was gone. His words sounded hollow, brittle. Maya took a slow step forward. From her other pocket, she drew out a folded paper, its edges sealed with an official stamp. She unfolded it carefully and laid it on the table for all to see. "This is our marriage certificate," she said. "Signed, notarized, hidden away for years but still alive, just like the truth." The room erupted in whispers. People leaned over each other to catch a glimpse. Someone pulled out a phone, recording, knowing history was unfolding. Sterling's breath came harsh, uneven. He looked from the photograph to the paper, to the child clinging to Maya. His empire had been built on intimidation. But intimidation could not silence documents or a child's bloodline. Maya's voice grew stronger, though never raised. "You forced him to leave us. You tried to erase me, erase her. But you cannot erase what is real. The truth does not vanish because you say it does." She reached into her bag once more, pulling out a small flash drive, simple and ordinary, yet carrying the weight of years. "And this," she said, "contains his voice, Daniel's own words, recorded before his death. Words you could never silence." A hush fell so deep the hum of the ceiling fans could be heard. Every eye was fixed on her, every ear straining for what came next. Maya paused, her hand steady on the drive. She looked at Sterling, her gaze sharp as glass. "You can shout. You can deny. But you cannot bury this any longer. Tonight the truth is yours to face, and the world will know it." Sterling sagged in his chair, his face ghostly. His arrogance, so loud an hour ago, seemed to melt away. He knew what she held in her hands. He knew the words his son had once spoken in secret. Words that could unravel everything. The room's silence was no longer Sterling's weapon. It belonged to Maya now. She had taken it, filled it with truth, and turned it into a storm ready to break. The room held its breath, The little flash drive sat in Maya's hand like a match waiting for fire. The manager stepped forward, his face steady, and brought a tablet from behind the host stand. He connected the drive without a word. The screen glowed. People leaned in. The billionaire stared as if willing the device to fail. A shaky image appeared. A young man looked into the camera with tired eyes. He spoke in a low voice, careful and clear. He said he loved a woman named Maya. He said they had married in private. He said there was a child. He said he had tried to make it right, had tried to bring the truth to light, but he had been warned and pushed and controlled. He said fear had kept him quiet. He said he was done being quiet. No one moved. Forks lay forgotten. The only sound was the soft hum of the tablet. The young man named the shell companies. He named the partners who hid funds and falsified values. He named the deals that took homes from families who could not fight back. He spoke of a safe where papers were kept. He spoke of dates, of transfers, of signatures. He said his father would deny everything. He asked anyone who found this to protect Maya and the child. When the video ended, the room felt different, as if the walls had shifted. The silence was no longer heavy. It was charged. A guest at the bar swallowed hard and set down his glass. A woman near the door crossed herself. The manager straightened and looked at the billionaire. Two uniformed officers, who had been called, discreetly when tempers first rose, stepped closer to the corner table. They did not touch him. They did not need to. The billionaire tried to stand. His hand shook on the back of the chair. He started to speak, and then stopped. The words would not come. His jaw worked as if against a locked door. He looked at the child pressed against Maya's side. He looked at the faded photo still on the linen. He looked at the certificate with its quiet stamp. Maya lifted her chin. She did not gloat. She did not raise her voice. She spoke to the manager, to the room, to the officers. She said there were more documents held safely with counsel. She said copies would be shared with the authorities. She said she was ready to sign a statement that night. She placed the flash drive into an evidence bag the manager provided. She thanked him for the bag. Even in that moment, she was precise, respectful, calm. Phones were out now, not to gawk, but to bear witness. The story had broken open, and no, one could push it back into the dark. A few of the billionaire's guests slipped away, faces gray. One tried to clap him on the shoulder and could not do it. Another stared down at the white tablecloth as if it were snow. The officers asked the billionaire to accompany them. He hesitated, then nodded, the fight gone from his shoulders. As he passed Maya, he looked at her for a long second, as if searching for a lie and finding none. He opened his mouth, then closed it and let the officers lead him toward the door. The front chime sounded again. The night air moved through the room, cool and clean. The child lifted her face and looked up at Maya. Her eyes were bright but unsure. Maya crouched to meet her gaze. She smoothed a small braid between her fingers. She told her that everything was all right. She told her that truth was strong. The child nodded and held on tighter. News does not move slowly in a city. By morning, headlines asked questions out loud that people had whispered for years. A press conference announced an inquiry. Warrants followed. Boxes were carried from offices that had once been closed to everyone but the powerful. The safe was opened. Inside were papers like the ones Daniel had described. Names and dates matched. Witnesses came forward. Some were older now. Some had waited a very long time to be asked. In the days that followed, the golden spoon changed its light. The manager posted a public note about dignity and care. Staff were trained in new standards that protected them, not just the guests. A small framed card near the host stand read that respect was not optional. People noticed the card. People smiled when they saw it. The billionaire's empire cracked. Cases were brought. Settlements were reached. Some victims received restitution, long delayed. Others had their names cleared. The city that had shrugged at power began to speak with a straighter spine. Maya did not seek the cameras. She met with attorneys. She signed and swore and sat through long interviews with patients. She worked her shifts until she no longer needed tertium. When she left the bistro, she hugged the kitchen crew one by one. The head chef pressed a small coin into her palm, an old kitchen superstition for luck. She laughed softly and kept it. Time moved forward like a steady tide. 2 years passed. The brownstone where Maya now lived was sunlit and kind, with plants on the sill and a small desk near the window piled with papers and markers. The child's drawings filled a wall. Some were of a blue house, some were of a park, many were of a tall figure holding a small hand. On the shelf sat a simple photo in a wooden frame. A young man with tired eyes stood beside a young woman, both smiling without fear. Maya worked each day at a foundation named for the man in that photo, the AO. Office was on a quiet street with a bright sign and an open door. People came in with folders and stories. They asked for help with loans that tricked them. They asked for help with evictions. They asked for help finding their voice. The foundation offered legal aid, classes, and a phone that someone always answered. On the wall in the lobby hung a line that said, "Every person has dignity, no one can take." She visited the restaurant sometimes for tea with the manager, who still kept a table by the window. The staff wore pins that said, "We stand together." New guests noticed. Old guests said the place felt warmer. The emerald-suited woman visited as well, bringing books for the child and speaking at fundraisers with the clear strength of someone who will not look away. On a mild autumn afternoon, Maya and the child walked up a green hill where the grass leaned in the breeze. They brought fresh flowers. They stood before a simple stone and placed the flowers on the ground. They did not talk for a while. The child traced letters with a finger and then looked up and asked if truth always wins. Maya said truth does not always come fast, but it keeps moving. It finds a way. They stood together, hands linked, the city quiet in the distance. A bird lifted from a branch and drew a curve across the sky. The child laughed at nothing but the air and the light. Maya smiled, and the sound eased something that had lived inside her for years. She had been a student, then a worker, then a witness, then a voice. She had been invisible and then undeniable. She had been humiliated and then heard. She had learned that power built on fear is only tall, not strong. She had learned that a single word from a child can open a door no one can close. When they left the hill, she felt the ground steady under her feet. She had kept her promise at the grave. She had reclaimed her family's name. She had built something for others to stand on. Back at the brownstone, the child raced to the wall of drawings and taped up a new page. It showed 3 figures and a house with bright windows. Above the roof, the child had written one word in careful letters: home.